Hi guys, Tom Shepherd here. This is video 3 in a series of me showing you how to paint this fella. In the first 2 videos we've looked at blocking in big shapes. Second video is refining those shapes. If you want to see them, they're in the link above. In this video we're going to take those shapes and begin to model them and actually look at pushing the painting towards a good finish. So let's get on with it. I usually find it easy to start modelling in the focal point and then work out from there. It's kind of the way in. So just going to refine that shape a little bit, starting to bring in some slightly lighter paint and starting to think about how I'm going to finish areas off. So we started with big simple shapes. The shapes are still simple, but we're moving towards shapes that are just a bit smaller. So smaller simple shapes, and I'm trying not to get too caught up in detail. I want to keep the brush and the brush marks quite big. I'm just going to model this focal point, and there'll always be certain bits that haven't made sense for quite a while, and hopefully this modelling stage we start to resolve areas. And we're basically setting the painting up for finishing. So we're modelling it and setting it up to finish it off. So we can start to look at smaller details. I don't want to get bogged down in detail, but still paying attention to tone. And it's when we start to get these subtle variations of tone within one area that our painting begins to look just a touch more finished. And that's what we're after. Yeah, so you can see already this bit to me is starting to look a little more finished. And also we've got a fairly accurate drawing in place, so we can go back to some nice big bold brush strokes. And it's those big bold brush strokes that are going to start giving a feeling of movement to the feathers. So still thinking about tone and colour, so it's a little bit more orangey there. And the thing is, you can, depending on how you like to paint, you can take this idea as far as you like. So I quite like my paintings left quite big and brushy, but if you're someone that likes a bit more refinement or a bit more photorealism, you can take the same principle and just, the only difference is you start to use slightly smaller shapes and you go smaller and smaller with them. So you can almost see, if I was to then take this same approach that I've used here into the face and the beak, we're really going to start getting quite a finished look. Some lovely simple brush strokes if I can. And if I was to do these sort of finishing brush strokes too early on, before I'd set up and refined my big shapes, more often than not you probably find they're in the wrong place and I'd need to go back in and change them. But because I spent time refining those shapes, I'm a bit more confident as to where everything needs to go. And that's kind of what I meant when I was talking about the painting is going to be a lot quicker if you spend this little bit of extra time in the refinement stage, just working out exactly what's going to happen. Beefing up some of those tones. There's a more of a shadowy tone in there. That's going to help give me a feeling of feathers a little bit more. I'm purposely letting a lot of my underpainting show through because I made the effort to put down a first layer of paint that in its own right was quite attractive, but we obviously need to make adjustments over the top. But it doesn't mean that I can't let some of this lovely paint show through. some of those initial brush strokes and those big washes. Still staying aware of what tone it is I'm using, so there's quite a light patch here and here, kind of drifts into shadow down this side, but it's not quite as much as shadow down here. So still being aware of tone. Are there any of the shadows as I go that I can just kind of beef up a little bit, make a bit stronger? So in there, just get a slightly stronger shadow. And really that's, you could take this red area a lot further by just putting in more and more shapes. And in the final stage, which will be the finishing touches, we may go back into it and put in just a few last brush strokes, but really, I don't want to do much more than that. I'm going to focus my attention in the focal point and bring that to life, and then we can look at just finishing off this area down here. So I'm going to take the same approach into the face and start to try and bring that to life in the same sort of way. I'm going to stick with a big brush still because it's stopping me from kind of fiddling around too much, which is always a good thing. I'm trying to just keep these brush strokes nice and simple. So there's a stronger shadow here. So within this big shape, there's a smaller shape of shadow which sits in here. So if I can strengthen that. Again, it's all about getting the right tone. It's in shadow, but it's not too dark. And what it's doing is it's helping to sculpt. You can see that's just a touch too dark. So again, I was talking about you're not going to get everything right straight away. There we go. It's just enough darker to give us more of a shadow in here. And then I'm going to go in and break it up with some lighter tones. So you notice here we could be quite big and broad, and I was working the whole painting. And now we're homing in on the focal point. I'm just needing to slow down a bit, be a bit more careful with my shapes, start looking at even softening some edges and a small amount of blending in places. But again, we're setting an area up. There's a nice little light in there. Some little variations of light in here. This bit just needs resolving a touch. So here I am covering up a lot of my underpainting because it wasn't quite the right colour. And just softening edges. If there's anywhere I can get away with a touch more detail, it's in the focal point. As long as I keep the rest of the painting nice and brushy. And then I'll go into the eye in a minute and that'll take just a bit more focus to get right. If we can get that eye right and popping out and looking at us, then we're pretty much there. The rest is just finishing touches over the top. So here there's a slightly more, just in here there's a gentler transition between light and shade. So if I can just get that, slightly softer transition between light and shade, and then look at doing the lights back over the top. So more subtle variations of tone just in here, just to soften that area down. So you can see this is now quite nicely modelled and it's almost ready just for the finishing touches over the top. So again, we're going to take that same approach and we're going to put it in here, quickly tackle this, and then that's the modelling stage, ready for the final stage, which is the finishing off strokes. So we're going into these simple shapes. We're just going to look for smaller shapes and look for any adjustments we need to make to the tone, refine those shapes and model them, and basically get this beak as good as finished as it's going to be in the final painting. We might well come back in and just put in some finishing touches, but really I want to get it as it's going to be in the final painting. So there's some bits, there's some smaller refined darks in here. So I just want to get that lovely deep dark in there. So that's just giving us a bit more form in there. Even in the dark, what looks initially to be black of the beak, there's still some variation of tone. It's just a bit more subtle. So as that black on the beak moves into sunlight, it becomes slightly warmer. We get just a little variation of tone in there. We can then take that same approach into this side of the beak. Keeping those shapes really simple. And even at this late stage, I'm still trying to stay away from detail. I'm still almost forgetting that it's a parrot. I'm just trying to look for shape and tone. And just looking for shape and tone will pretty much get you most of the way. So there's a couple of darks we can strengthen, and a couple of shapes that just need breaking up more. So there's a lovely deep dark just under here. And it's when these very final shapes go in that we should find things start to begin to look more finished. So there's a really deep dark in there. They're almost like little dark accents in places. The beak just at the top gets ever so slightly darker, and the red gets ever so slightly darker. So see, this stage is a little bit slower because we're doing smaller shapes. But hopefully it's all worth it for when we get the finishing touches on. So that was the shadow that runs just under the head there, and just ever so slightly darker just in here. So again, just a simple dark shape just under there. Then we can move into the light area of the beak. So hopefully you can still see that, like I said, you're not going to get everything right straight from the start. Painting is a process. So now we're going to get into this lovely light shape here. Again, you might put on the light and decide it needs to be a little softer in places. Is it a warm light or is it a cool light? In this case, it's quite a warm orangey light. Just as we start to creep into those much smaller shapes, things just start to look a bit more finished. I'm going to take that same colour while I've got it on the brush and look for some smaller lights up here. Some smaller lights around here. We can get into the eye in a minute. And what you usually find is that as we start to put on these lights, that's when things really begin to look more finished. So there's a lovely light in there. And I'm looking for a simple version of my subject. There's actually quite a lot of detail in the photo, but I'm after something not quite as detailed, just a bit more suggestive. Even now, still being aware of what tone I'm using. I'm just trying to find that balance between just enough detail to make it kind of lifelike and look finished, but not too much that we start to get fussy with it. And it can be quite a fine line. But the face can certainly handle a bit of detail because it is the focal point. Take a bit of that same slightly darker colour, put it here. Just lost the shape a little bit here. So still, even now, still able to refine shapes, it's not a problem. Let's give that beak a bit more curve. And then really that whole face, apart from the eye, which I'm going to get in now, is ready for finishing touches. So I'm going to quickly, after I've done the eye, come in here, get that almost as finished as it's going to be. And then that's the modelling stage done, and we're ready for finishing touches. So the eye, easy to get bogged down with all the details in the eye, but really what I'm looking for is exactly the same as elsewhere, it's just smaller. We've got simple shapes. I'm asking myself what tone they are. So we've got a nice light shape on the underside of the eye there. We've got a slightly darker shape over the top of the eye. And then we've got a very dark shape in the centre. And then our finishing touches will be the little variations of light in and around the eye and the highlights, but that will come in the final stage. So really nice deep dark. We can get away with it in the focal point. Nice deep dark in there, and that's really all we need for the eye. So that's now set up for finishing. So a few more last bits to do around here, and that's the modelling stage done. It gets slightly lighter as we move away from the beak just in there. We could start to go back to some slightly more expressive brushstrokes. Now we're moving away from this area, which is going to be a little bit tighter. We can come back in with a big brush and we can start to look at some of these more exciting brushstrokes. All the time staying aware of what tone it is that I'm trying to put down. I don't want to suddenly start putting things that are too dark in here, or colours that are too light in here. We want to stick with our initial pattern of light and shade. All we're trying to do is just bring out certain areas. And we'll do that by sticking light over the top of more shadowy areas, but we can also go in. It's all to do with tone. We just start to strengthen a few of those shadows to start to give the illusion of feathers in this area. And so this bit is staying more in shadow, and as we move around here, we're coming more into light. So let's get some really big brush strokes in there and sharpen up some of these edges. So we started off with a lot of very soft edges and a big blurry wash to start the whole painting, and now going in and quite selectively just kind of picking little bits to sharpen up. And generally it's these lights that are sharpening areas up. And again, we could do a lot more with this if you wanted to, but I quite like it left in this sort of brushy way. So now we're going to come into this area and model this. So again, same principle, we're going to take what we've already got, and there might be areas that are slightly darker, and there'll be areas that are ever so slightly lighter. But just like all the other areas, I don't want to start putting anything too extreme in there. It's all kind of subtle variations of shape and tone. And that might actually be enough for that bit. We don't need to overly work it. See if there's a couple of bits where it gets slightly lighter. Just a touch. And then the same as we move into the blue, there's a couple of very, very deep, darker areas within this basic shape here. And again, these dark accents should help to really strengthen some of the shapes. So I'm going to sharpen up just the odd mark here and there. Being selective about which bits you sharpen up. If I start sharpening up everything, we lose kind of the looseness and the flowing shapes. But if I just pick a few bits where I sharpen up those edges, we shouldn't lose that initial kind of looseness we were after. And then over the top of that, we've got some lovely blue catching the sunlight. So now we're moving towards finishing brush strokes here. So I'm just going to put a few in down here. And this is when we start to move to maybe some stronger colour. And all the time, this is kind of what a lot of the painting's been building up to. Some of these lovely big, bold brush strokes. And the idea is, because of the way we've set up the painting and the way we've modelled it, I can be fairly confident as to where these brush strokes go. And so the idea is I can put them on in a nice loose way and not really fiddle with the brush stroke once it's gone down. I'm looking to put it down and leave it as it is. So it's slightly darker there than there, but it's still lighter than what was there before. I don't need to go over the top with it, but we can just do. I quite like this bit of paper left. It's just a nice light. There's no harm in leaving a bit of that, especially in a kind of sketchy painting like this. So that's really the modelling stage. It's almost finished, and actually pretty much all of that is done. We can just go back into the face and really finish that off, and that'll be the next video. To sum up, we've taken our big shapes, we've refined them, and now we've just modelled them, starting to create some form in our subject. In the very final video, we're going to look at those little finishing touches to bring it to life. If you like what you've seen, give me a thumbs up, really helps. And talk to me, guys. There's comments below if you want to ask questions or just give me your thoughts, or let me know how you've been getting on with your own painting. Hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified of new videos as they come up. Well, that's enough from me. Happy painting!